Now, surely you didn't think I had just one hat, did you? No, sirree. This is going to be a discussion of the Mexican War. I done got my southern accent on and I've decided to keep it for a while. This handout right here, we're going to talk about the Mexican War. We're going to look at each part therein. And here's how we're going to figure out how we came to get a whole bunch of land out there in the West, not just Texas. We're going to whoop up on the Mexicans and take their lunch money is what's going to happen here. And we got a pro-expansionist president named James Polk. He is all about it. So let's look here at the PowerPoint and figure out how this came to be. All right, on your handout here, we're looking at the causes of the war. That would be right. Cheer. The causes of the war is that Mexico and us, that'd be the U.S., we dispute what the southern border of Texas is. If you remember, they said it was up here on the Nueces River, but we don't think it's down here on the Rio Grande. And so this is what this war is really about, is just trying to figure out who owns this land right here. We actually sent a feller to try and buy it, but Mexico wouldn't even talk to us about it. His name was Slidell. It's called Slidell's rejection. Mexico wouldn't even consider selling us that land. So we put troops right here on the Nueces River, and we claimed that Mexico fired at our troops and that war broke out. Now, Abraham Lincoln, he wasn't really believing this. He thought that this whole thing smelled up to high heaven. It was a little bit fishy. And so he actually was kind of upset. You know, there were a lot of people up in the north who didn't think that we necessarily needed Texas. Or we needed more land in the south because it was going to expand slavery. So he actually got a little bit upset, and he said, "Are you sure that Mexican troops fired on us? I want to see the spot where that happened." It was called the Spot Resolution. And they never really did convince a lot of people that this whole, that Mexico had really started it. But once it was started, we were intent upon finishing it. So, however the war started, and whoever shot the first shots, it was underway. A big supporter of the war, and all the supporters of the war, you're moving to the next box on your graphic organizer. The Southerners. Well, hopefully you can figure out why the Southerners were all about it. They were hoping to expand slavery. They knew that we would gain James K. Polk. He was from North Carolina and Tennessee. He also wanted to expand, and so he was a big supporter of the war. And then expansionists and nationalists who just wanted to see the country grow and get stronger, and they were in big support of the war as well. So those are the main groups that thought the war was a good idea. Now, of course, we had some opposition to the war as well. Northerners, a lot of Northerners who didn't want to see slave-holding territory expand because that would make slaveholders more powerful in Congress in general. So they were not so crazy about that whole idea, and so they were opposed to the war. Also, abolitionists. It should be clear that they were radicals who wanted to end slavery everywhere, so they sure wouldn't want to see it spread into the United States. And then we had particular individuals like Abe Lincoln, who was an up-and-coming congressman in Illinois. He didn't want to see slavery spread. And then, of course, we had people like Henry David Thoreau, the transcendentalist. Transcendentalists had come into a determination that slavery was evil. And this is, you remember in the previous videos where I told you that Henry David Thoreau didn't pay his taxes and he had to go to prison for not paying them? This is the war that he so opposed that he didn't pay his taxes and therefore had to go to jail. So this is where he made his protest most well known. Okay. There's also a little embarrassing situation that happens here where we try and where it's outed by the press that we tried to buy or demand Cuba from Spain, kind of like we had demanded Florida from Spain. The press leaked this, and the whole plan was abandoned. The reason why this is even mentioned is that it gave the opponents of the war a little bit of ammunition. It looked like we were kind of like crazy, power-hungry, expansionist radicals during this time period. And so this Austin Manifesto leaking to the press made us look like we were just kind of getting above our raisins in terms of our ambitions. The question is, while we went to war, did the U.S. generally support the war or not? And the thought is that they must have supported it. The best indicator that they did was that they elected James K. Polk, and James K. Polk was a strong expansionist. So they must have wanted this war if they elected him as the kind of big idea. The U.S. had lots of advantages in this war. We'd been around longer. The Mexicans had just gotten their independence in 1821, so they were fairly new in the infancy of their democracy. So we were in luck. We had a stable government. We had lots of money and plenty of supplies. We had good civil military leaders. We had just started this new military school in West Point, New York. And we had just graduated our first graduates from West Point, including people like Robert E. Lee and Philip Sheridan and William Tecumseh Sherman. And what's interesting about those guys is they're going to fight together here in this war, but then they're going to split up and fight against each other in the Civil War. Famous movie about that. It's called Of Gods and Generals. Our troops are better trained as a result. And we also invent this artillery, these cannons that are on big wagon wheels, and you can wheel them around and move them. And that just darn blows the minds of the Mexican troops as we move our artillery all over the landscape. The Mexicans are in bad shape. They got a new government that hasn't really consolidated its hold over the land. They're unstable. Their generals are old, from the 1820s, and it's now 1840s, so their generals were like 60 years old and a little dated in terms of their attitudes and ideas. They are not very well equipped, and their troops are not very well trained. So they're pretty much just kind of outgunned. The war starts. Once that begins, we have these men who come to lead the effort. Winfield Scott here, he's going to lead and take over. There's nowhere to really write this on your handout, so just for your information. Winfield Scott here, he's called Old Fuss and Feathers. He's real persnickety about his outfits and how he looked. He's going to march in and take Mexico City. Zach Taylor here, future president. He's called Old Rough and Ready. He's a little less persnickety about his appearance, but a good fighter all the same. He's going to be fighting in northeast Mexico. And then we have Stephen Kearny here. Stephen Kearny's a real interesting case. By the way, all the men who fought in this war were volunteers. That's where the Tennessee Volunteers, the Tennessee Vols, that's where they get their name. So we don't have a war where we draft people to the Civil War. So it's all volunteer effort. His men leave Kansas, and they want to come fight. They march all the way from Kansas to Santa Fe. And then when they get to Santa Fe, the Mexican leaders of the town, they don't want to fight because it's going to screw up their trade. So they just put their arms down and give up the city. And that didn't sit well with Stephen Kearny and his men because they wanted to have some good stories to tell when they got home. So they just marched on to California. And so they're called the Long Marchers because they marched halfway across the country just to find a fight. When they finally get to California, they find this guy here, John C. Fremont. He's led the Californians to revolt against the Mexican government. And so they joined that effort. Stephen Kearny and John C. Fremont joined that effort together. And then the Navy comes around to that coast, led by Admiral John Sloat. And so it's really quite a joint effort to control California. So here you see, this is where Winfield Scott takes over Mexico City. This is where Zachary Taylor is working to control northeast Mexico. Here comes Stephen Kearny through Santa Fe. Oh shoot, those people don't want to fight. So they march on over here. This is where the battle for California took place, with the Navy joining them. And that's why California is called the Bear Flag Republic. And they're their own little deal there for a while. And that's why they got that bear on their state flag. Who won? Well, you know the U.S. did. It's called, oh, this is my favorite treaty in the whole world. It's called the Treaty of Guadalupe, Hidalgo. Now that's a good name for a treaty. In that treaty, Mexico agrees to let that southern river, the Rio Grande, be the border of Texas. That's what had started the war all along. They agreed to give us New Mexico and California because we had clearly controlled that land through winning military victories there. So let me show you a map real fast. So see, we get this and we get this, but what we gonna do about this? We can't have this be the United States, this be Mexico, and this be the United States. That'd be kind of strange. So what they agree is that the U.S. is going to pay $15 million for the other part. That's the northern part of California, Nevada, the northern part of New Mexico, Utah, the northern part of Arizona, and most of Colorado and Wyoming. Okay? So that's how, through the Mexican War, we come to control all that area out west. And it looks like this. Zachary Taylor is going to be elected in 1848 as a war hero from this war, and all this red part is what we get through the Mexican Cession and the Mexican War. Now, in 1853, we decide we want this little piece of land down here. This cost us $15 million. This will cost us $10 million. Doesn't seem like a very good deal, but what was going on is Stephen Douglas and some other men in Congress, they wanted to build a southern railroad here, so that's why they were so intent upon getting this land right here called the Gadsden Purchase. But after the Gadsden Purchase, that's going to be it. We're going to have the whole continental United States figured out. Another effect of the war is that we're going to be fighting over whether it's going to be free or slave. And this guy named David Wilmot, he stands up in Congress and he says, hey, I got an idea. Let's just not let slavery in the Mexican Cession at all. It's not passed, so you might be wondering, well, why the heck do I need to remember this law that didn't pass? It seems like in U.S. history we should just be studying the laws that do pass. The reason is that this is like the gunshot that starts the Civil War, because it's that fight over slavery and whether it's going to spread that will lead to the Civil War. So without the Mexican War, we might not have had the Civil War, because it's all this new land that's going to create a crisis about the status of it being slave or free. Already talked to you here about the Gadsden Purchase. This is another result of the war. We purchased the land for $10 million, and it finishes the continental United States. That means the 48 contiguous means they be touching. Then 48 contiguous states. The only other two states being Hawaii and Alaska that don't touch the other states. Okay. A last thing you need to know about is that gold is discovered. This isn't be written on your chart anywhere. There's nowhere on your chart you can write it, but in 1848, you need to know that this guy named James Marshall discovered gold in Sutter's Mill, California. Gold's fever starts to spread, and in 1849, a whole bunch of fellers, and a couple of ladies, they went west looking for gold. They're called the 49ers. That's why the San Francisco football team is called the 49ers, because they're named after the people who went west to San Francisco to find gold. That's why California is going to be the first state that has the most people in it to apply for statehood. So if you look back here, all the people are going to run here, and this is going to be the first state, even though it's the farthest west, this is going to be the first state that's ready to come into the Union, and that's going to cause a little controversy over its status as a free or slave state. Okay, so here's a little California. This shows you some miners, and well, golly, look at that feller. He done discovered gold. The gold rush. Alright, well, I hope you've enjoyed this little segment here and the little bit of flavor of the West I brought to it. I wanted to be sure and show off my hat collection. Won't you see my belt collection, too? This is my favorite belt right here. Look at this. Turquoise and a little bit of red. That thing looks nice with my boots. Gotta love my boots. Yes, sirree. That makes you feel like you're right at home. And then, oh, don't forget this belt buckle. This is one of my favorites, too. It's got turquoise and some coins from out west, including a buffalo. Ew-wee, that is some nice stuff. So I'm glad we could have this little discussion about the West together, and I could share my whole Western get up with you. I'll be seeing you in class. See you later, partners.